The bottom line is that as a Christian, I have a foundation, but as a Christian, I would ask Bill the question, what would change your mind? I mean, you said even if you came to faith, you'd never give up believing in billions of years. I think I quoted you correctly, you said something like that recently. So that would be also my question to Bill.
Time. Mr. Nye?
We would just need one piece of evidence. We would need the fossil that swam from one layer to another. We would need evidence that the universe is not expanding. We would need evidence that the stars appear to be far away, but they're not. We would need evidence that rock layers can somehow form in just 4,000 years instead of the extraordinary amount. We would need evidence that somehow you can reset atomic clocks and keep neutrons from becoming protons. You bring on any of those things and you would change me immediately. The question I have for you, though, fundamentally, and for everybody watching, Mr. Ham, what can you prove? What you have done tonight is spent most of all the time coming up with explanations about the past. What can you really predict? What can you really prove in a conventional scientific, or in a conventional, I have an idea that makes a prediction and it comes out the way I see it? This is very troubling to me.
You know, I almost feel sorry for Ken Ham. You almost feel sorry for him because he's committed to the Word of God. And that's it, with no exception. No evidence, no proof, nothing. Guys, when you start to think that way, you got problems. You got serious problems. And we're going to take this one step further now. And we're going to show you the post-debate with Bill Nye and Ken Ham on a CNN interview. And we'll look at the global warming and the climate change, and we're going to all integrate this all together. So, John, let's go to the next one.
What better time for a hot button debate about what's causing all this extreme weather? Joining me now to go head-to-head, Bill Nye, science educator and CEO of the Planetary Society, and Ken Ham, the president and founder of Answers in Genesis US and the Creation Museum. Gentlemen, welcome to you. You've just had this very high-profile and much-talked-about debate on creationism versus evolution. So, Ken Ham, let me start with you. Who is responsible for this massive snowstorm raging across America, God or science?
Actually, you know, the Bible tells us the whole of creation is running down because of man's fall, and so we do have extremes in weather patterns today. But, you know, there's been climate change ever since the flood of Noah's day, we would say, massive climate change. So, you know, it all depends on the weather patterns. It's what we see today, the way things interact. You know, creationists have no different explanations on what's happening. They talk about lows, they talk about highs, they observe what's happening. So it's no different than what an evolutionist would talk about.
Bill Nye, you've been looking there at Ken, as you have been all evening in the debate. I was catching some of it. With a look of vague bafflement on your face. How did you think the debate went tonight? I mean, did you learn anything which was even remotely persuasive to you, that maybe you're barking up the wrong tree about this whole global warming business?
No, and let me say, just inherent in Mr. Ham's answer, first of all, it was a very respectful evening. I thought we both gave it our best, and I appreciate the opportunity. But just notice that inherent in his response was that the world is winding down since the Great Flood. And that somehow the climate change, what I heard, what I infer from your remarks, is that this is sort of a punishment for humankind. And I'm very skeptical of all three of those things. Very skeptical of the ancient flood, very skeptical that the world is winding down, except its orbit, its spin is slowing because of the pull of the moon and the tides. And I'm skeptical that it's a punishment from a deity. But with that said, there's more heat energy in the atmosphere than there has been in a long time, and the rate at which the heat energy is being added is what's causing all kinds of trouble, or all kinds of potential trouble around the world. You cannot tie any one event to climate change, but interestingly enough, there is new statistical evidence, and I encourage you to check out the Union of Concerned Scientists, that extreme heat events can be tied to climate change. So that when more heat energy is in the atmosphere, you expect more storms.
Okay, so
Actually,
let me go back
if I can say,
let me go back
yes.
to you, Ken. Ken, let me ask you this. This is what concerns me about this whole debate. Regardless of which side you're on, the number of Americans who believe global warming isn't happening has risen 23%, up 7 points since April 2013. How is it a good idea that Americans are being persuaded it doesn't exist if there's even a 1% chance that it does exist? And given that 80% of scientists all think it does, obviously the chances are much higher. But even if you believe your version, that it's all a load of phooey, is it really helpful to anybody that we just take a risk and do nothing?
By the way, I just want to say to Bill, too, that some of the catastrophic things that happen and the terrible things that happen in the world, even death, the fact that we die, is because of the fall, not because of the flood. But first of all, the debate tonight was not about global warming. It wasn't about climate change. The debate tonight was about creation, evolution, about science.
No, I know, but I just asked you a question about global warming.
In actual fact, in actual fact, one of the emphases I brought tonight was that we need to understand the difference between talking about the past, historical science, and observational science in the present. And if we're going to talk about climate change, we need to apply that. For instance, there are things we can directly observe. We've got records of temperatures, and we can understand when things have been warming, which they were a bit in the past, and now they're cooling again. And we've got records going back a fair way to show those things happen, and those things do happen in this world. But when it comes to interpreting exactly why, I mean, there are some scientists that think that the activity of the sun has a lot to do with the climate on Earth. There's some that believe that. The biggest greenhouse gas we got is water vapor.
Ken, here's the point. 80% of climate scientists believe global warming is a real and present thing. So you're in the massive minority, and yet you're a very vocal minority, and that vocality is basically
I didn't even tell you what I believe about global warming.
Oh, what do you believe then?
I didn't tell you what I believe about global warming. I didn't say I believe in global warming. In fact,
I believe in climate change
because we see that and we have records of that.
Right. Sorry, I was under the assumption you don't believe in global warming as an entity.
Well, no. Where have I ever said that? I've never said that.
You mentioned it on a radio broadcast that's there was a link to it.
One of the things that we say is the fact that climates do change, and we need to do a lot of investigation as to what's actually happening and why that's happening. There's a difference between what you observe and then interpreting the reasons, and different scientists have different reasons. A lot more research needs to be done in this area.
Do you believe, Ken, do you believe, as I'm led to believe you believe, that dinosaurs and man coexisted?
Actually, based on the Bible, I believe that all the land animals were made on day 6, and Adam and Eve were made on day 6. And, people try to make fun of us believing that we believe that dinosaurs live with people, but there's a lot of animals alive today that, according to evolutionists, live with dinosaurs, and some of them, like crocodiles and for instance, the horseshoe crab supposedly evolved before dinosaurs, and they live today with people. So what's so remarkable about believing that
we find
dinosaurs
fossil
live
bones
with humans?
Right, but we find fossil bones of dinosaurs going back 70 million years. Are you suggesting then that man existed 70 million years ago?
No, I'm not saying 70 million years, and you don't find dinosaur bones with labels on them. Where did you get the 70 million years from? Prove that to me.
Okay. Bill, let's turn back to you.
The problem...
Bill, let's turn back to you. I mean,
the trouble that...
Yeah, go on, respond.
Well, the trouble is that the climate deniers, just to get back to that question, are introducing this idea that scientific uncertainty, especially about any one weather event like we're having here in Kentucky, is the same as scientific doubt about the whole thing. And that is a tactic that's been used for a long time. The cigarette industry is held up as the people do this. And my concern, and the reason I accepted this challenge, this debate tonight, is that we will raise a generation of science students who don't embrace the process of science, who get confused by the idea that scientific uncertainty is the same as scientific doubt. And this is not in our best interest. Now, as you know, I was born in the U.S., I'm a U.S. citizen, I want the U.S. to succeed, and I do not want the U.S. to raise a generation of science students who don't appreciate the process of science. Now, when it comes to humans living with dinosaurs, that's an extraordinary claim for which, for me, there's absolutely no proof at all, none. Furthermore, I claim I challenged you, Ken, on this great flood that happened only 4,000 years ago, and in my opinion, Ken, with all due respect, as we like to say, you never got around to saying why there's these extraordinary number of snow ice layers in ice cores, these extraordinarily old trees, and why, for whatever reason, radiometric dating would not be true, would not be accurate.
Oh, remember,
how can there be light from stars that are more than 6,000 light years away, and so on?
Yeah, well, we covered some of these things in the debate, as you know, and when even looking at tree rings, you have to make assumptions. Was it 1 a year, 2 a year, or whatever? And even matching up different trees, there's assumptions involved in how they match those rings together. And I said ice can form very quickly in a game with ice cores.
Gentlemen,
so to me, you're once again introducing doubt. You're introducing doubt instead of
I've got to call a truce.
Thank you, Piers.
You've been at it all night. You've been at it on my show for not all night. But please come back again, and we'll continue.
Guys, isn't it a shame that Ken Ham believes in a book where the data can't be altered? Where everything is locked in stone? Nothing's locked in stone. Very few things are locked in stone. Gravity. I don't think you want to challenge gravity or the 4 major forces. But aside from that, all right, now, we spoke at the beginning of the show, why we've missed some shows, and it's because of the weather. And a polar vortex. I never heard of a polar vortex. And, that was getting back to my buddy Dave Rinelli over on WLAD. He was talking to the weatherman, and he's saying, it was thunder snow. And he said, I never heard of thunder snow. Could you explain what it is? Hey, bonehead, you never heard of something. Doesn't that tell you that things are changing? When there's weather that we don't know how to explain to one another, doesn't that tell you something? Are you too dim to see the light? Think about that. Really. When we have to start making up new words to explain the weather, that's what's called climate change. The globe warms and it makes the climate change. The weather is like your mood. The climate is like your personality. Get the idea? Kind of simple. All right, the next one, we're going to explain what a polar vortex is. So, John, hit it.
If you've been hearing that extreme cold spells, like the one that we're having in the United States now, disproves global warming, don't believe it. The fact is that no single weather episode can either prove or disprove global climate change. Climate is the pattern of weather that we observe geographically and over the seasons, and it's described in terms of averages, variations, and probabilities. But a growing body of evidence suggests that the kind of extreme cold being experienced by much of the United States as we speak is a pattern that we can expect to see with increasing frequency as global warming continues. And the reason is this. In the warming world that we're experiencing, the far north, the Arctic, is warming roughly twice as rapidly as the mid-latitudes, such as the United States. That means that the temperature difference between the Arctic and the mid-latitudes is shrinking. And that temperature difference is what drives what is called the circumpolar vortex, which is the great counterclockwise swirling mass of cold air that hovers over the Arctic. As the temperature difference between the Arctic and the mid-latitudes declines, the polar vortex weakens and it becomes wavier. The waviness means that there can be increased, larger excursions of cold air southward, that is into the mid-latitudes, and in the other phase of the wave, increased excursions of relatively warmer mid-latitude air into the far north. Computer models tell us that there are many different factors influencing these patterns. And as in all science, there will be continuing debate about exactly what is happening. But I believe the odds are that we can expect, as a result of global warming, to see more of this pattern of extreme cold in the Midwest.